Don't move. If I don't open my eyes, maybe this is a nightmare.
It's not a nightmare. Oh my god, what we did?
Did we get married in Vegas?
I think we did. And you're my boss.
Shit!
So what do we do now?
I don't know. You figure it out. You're my boss.
They woke up in a Vegas hotel suite with 3 immediate problems: a splitting headache, a wedding dress she didn't own yesterday, and her CEO boss Kang Min-jae sleeping beside her in a rumpled tuxedo. The platinum band on her finger matched the one on his hand. Memories came back in fragments. The conference party, the open bar Min-jae being uncharacteristically charming, the Elvis chapel with neon lights, an impersonator declaring them husband and wife, and a kiss that made her toes curl. She tried sneaking out, but Min-jae's hand grabbed her wrist. His eyes opened, cycling through confusion, horror, and resignation as he took in the wedding dress, the rings, and the marriage certificate on the nightstand. Neither spoke for a full minute. Then Min-jae sat up, dragged his hand down his face, and swore in Korean before stating they needed to figure this out. Soo-jin said fleeing to Seoul seemed rational. His phone rang. His grandmother. He declined and received a text that made him swear again. His grandmother Kang Hae-won had just announced retirement and was handing him control of Kang Industries with one condition. He had to be married for 6 months, or the company went to his cousin. She'd visit next week to meet his wife. Min-jae paced frantically, then stopped and looked at Soo-jin. 2 options. Annul this and lose everything, or keep the marriage 6 months until his grandmother signed over control. He named a figure that made her gasp. Double salary, expenses covered, promotion afterward. She thought of her student loans, her mother's medical bills, her apartment needing repairs. Against every instinct, she agreed. The first week was chaos. Min-jae created an Excel spreadsheet titled Marriage Maintenance Schedule with color-coded tabs for appearances, events, and mandatory affection moments.
He scheduled hand-holding sessions, allocated time for romantic texts, and created a backstory she had to memorize. Soo-jin said treating marriage like business was the least romantic thing ever. They argued 20 minutes before realizing they were having their first married fight. The living situation created more problems. Grandmother Kang employed investigators, so they had to alternate between his Gangnam penthouse and her tiny studio apartment for believable evidence.
The first time Min-jae saw her modest place, his horror was insulting. He asked if the building met safety codes. She snapped that not everyone could afford penthouses. His first night was comedy gold. He burned rice in her one-button cooker. He used dish soap in the washing machine, creating a bubble explosion flooding her bathroom. She found him standing helplessly in foam and laughed until she cried. He said stiffly, housekeepers handled domestic matters. She told him to learn how normal people lived. Her first night in his penthouse was equally disorienting. Everything was minimalist and expensive, clearly never lived in. The bathroom was bigger than her apartment. His refrigerator contained only water and protein shakes. He explained meal delivery handled nutrition. The sleeping arrangements created the most tension. They needed to share a bed to fool investigators. Min-jae proposed a pillow wall as boundary. The first night, he fell off the bed at 3 a.m. maintaining distance. The second night, he did it again, taking half the bedding. The third night, she found him wrapped in sheets on the floor like an expensive burrito. She giggled. He glared and said this wasn't funny. She told him to stay on his side like a normal person. Grandmother Kang's surprise visit happened Tuesday morning. She arrived unannounced with containers of homemade Korean food. Soo-jin had 90 seconds warning. She was in pajamas with disaster hair. Grandmother Kang was tiny, elegant in hanbok, radiating authority. Her sharp gaze missed nothing as she walked through the penthouse, noting separate toothbrushes and awkward body language. She sat them down and grilled Soo-jin in rapid Korean about family, education, and children. Then she dropped the bomb. She expected grandchildren within 9 months. She was 78 and didn't have time to waste. She wanted to hold great-grandchildren before she died. She brought herbal supplements to boost fertility. Min-jae choked on tea. Soo-jin felt blood drain from her face. They hadn't discussed fake babies. Grandmother Kang interpreted their silence as shy embarrassment and patted Soo-jin's hand. She'd check back in 3 months for pregnancy signs. Then she departed, leaving 2 panicked people. They stared at each other in horror. Their arrangement had become exponentially more complicated. Min-jae paced frantically. Soo-jin said they couldn't fake a pregnancy requiring an actual baby. He suggested claiming fertility problems. She said his traditional grandmother would drag them to every fertility doctor in Seoul. The next week's forced proximity that eroded professional walls. They attended family dinners, holding hands convincingly. At a cousin's wedding, Min-jae put his arm around her waist, and electricity shot through her. They shopped for furniture and argued about throw pillows like a real couple. And she realized she genuinely enjoyed his company. Min-jae revealed himself different from the cold CEO she knew. He remembered how she took coffee. He bought her favorite snacks without being asked. When she mentioned her mother's health struggles, he quietly arranged a specialist consultation. He tried cooking and nearly set off the fire alarm, then laughed at himself with genuine humor. The night everything changed started ordinarily. Soo-jin woke with burning fever and body aches. She tried hiding it because they had an important family dinner, but Min-jae noticed immediately. He touched her forehead and swore when he felt the heat. He canceled dinner, carried her to bed, and spent the entire night caring for her. He brought medicine and water, changed the compress on her forehead every hour, made her eat rice porridge. When she had fever dreams and cried out, he held her hand and murmured soothing words until she calmed. When she woke the next morning with fever broken, she found him asleep in the chair beside the bed, still holding her hand. Something shifted in her chest. This wasn't the cold CEO. This was a man who stayed up all night caring for her. From that night forward, the fake marriage felt dangerously real. Touches lingered longer. Smiles became genuine. They held hands because they wanted to, not for investigators. Min-jae stopped building the pillow wall. They finished each other's sentences and shared private jokes. But neither said anything about growing feelings, both terrified of ruining the arrangement that had become the best part of their lives. Everything shattered when Soo-jin overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. She came to Min-jae's office with documents and found him on the phone with his lawyer. Through the door, she heard him discussing the divorce timeline in clinical detail, asking about the cleanest way to end the marriage once 6 months was met, confirming the financial settlement was documented. She stood frozen as ice flooded her veins. This was fake. Always fake. She'd been falling in love while he planned their divorce like another business transaction. All those tender moments had been him playing his role perfectly. The care when she was sick. The way he looked at her like she was precious. All of it was an act to fool his grandmother. She walked away before he could see her and went home to cry. She'd broken the cardinal rule of fake relationships by catching real feelings. And Min-jae was already planning their ending like the practical businessman he was. For 3 days, she avoided him. She went back to calling him formally. She stopped initiating touches. She built an emotional wall he noticed immediately, but she refused to explain. Min-jae looked increasingly confused and hurt, which made it worse because he had no right to look hurt when this was always supposed to end. The confrontation happened at a family dinner when Grandmother Kang asked why they seemed distant. Soo-jin smiled and lied smoothly. After dinner, Min-jae cornered her and demanded to know what changed. She told him in a cold voice that nothing changed. This was always temporary. She was simply remembering professional boundaries. He looked like she'd slapped him. She informed him she'd overheard his divorce planning call. He went pale. She told him not to worry. She'd fulfill her obligation, then disappear from his life. Min-jae tried to explain the call wasn't what she thought. She cut him off. The arrangement was always business. She'd been foolish to forget that. The marriage was fake and would end on schedule. She locked herself in the guest bedroom while Min-jae stood outside calling her name until his voice went hoarse. The truth came out through the most unexpected source. Grandmother Kang arrived 2 days later and found them in separate rooms with visible tension. She sat them down and announced she wasn't stupid. She'd known from day one their marriage wasn't quite real. The Vegas timing was too convenient. Their body language had been awkward and rehearsed. But she wasn't angry. She'd been watching them carefully over months and seen something genuine developing beneath the performance, something neither had been brave enough to acknowledge. Min-jae looked stunned. Soo-jin felt her world tilting. Grandmother Kang explained she'd deliberately made up the 6-month requirement because she saw how they looked at each other even while pretending. She wanted to give them time to figure out what she'd seen clearly from the beginning. They were falling in love but too proud and stubborn to admit it without external pressure forcing proximity. Then Grandmother Kang addressed the phone call directly. She told Soo-jin she knew about the conversation that shattered her heart. Her investigators were thorough, but that call wasn't what it seemed. She turned to Min-jae and said it was time to stop being a coward and tell the truth. Min-jae's face flushed red, but his grandmother's stare was implacable. He took a shaking breath and began speaking, voice rough with emotion. Yes, he'd been asking about divorce procedures, about legal steps to dissolve a Nevada marriage. But Soo-jin needed to understand why. He hadn't been planning their ending. He'd been planning their beginning, their real beginning. He wanted to dissolve the Vegas marriage legally so afterward he could propose properly. Not in a drunken chapel with Elvis, not as part of business arrangements, but as a man who'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the woman who'd become the most important person in his world. Soo-jin's breath caught, tears springing to her eyes. Min-jae continued, words tumbling out like he'd held them back too long. He'd been researching traditional Korean wedding ceremonies, learning proper courtship customs, had even secretly met her mother to ask blessing. He wanted to do everything right this time. He wanted to marry her in a beautiful ceremony with both families present, wanted everyone to know this wasn't a business transaction. Somewhere between spreadsheet arguments and laundry disasters and nights falling off the bed trying not to touch her, he'd realized she was the only person who'd ever made him feel like a complete human being, rather than just a corporate machine. He'd been terrified to tell her, afraid she'd reject him, that she'd think he was extending their business deal. Soo-jin cried openly as months of suppressed emotions flooded out. Grandmother Kang stood with satisfaction, clearly pleased with forcing this confession. She patted them both on the head like children and announced her work was done. She expected a real wedding within 6 months and great-grandchildren within the year. Then she swept out with dramatic flair, leaving 2 people staring at each other with pounding hearts. Min-jae crossed the room and took Soo-jin's trembling hands. He apologized for the misunderstanding, for not being brave enough to tell her sooner, for making her think this was still business when his heart had been hers for weeks. He told her she'd become the first thought every morning and last thought every night. That her happiness had become more important than any company or inheritance. That living without her felt impossible, unbearable, like breathing without air. Soo-jin didn't let him finish. She kissed him to shut him up. And this kiss was nothing like the drunken Vegas kiss. This was sober and deliberate and full of all the feelings they'd been suppressing. When they broke apart breathless, Min-jae told her in soft Korean he wanted to do this right. Would she let him court her properly? Take her on real dates where they weren't pretending? And eventually, would she consider marrying him again, but this time for real? Soo-jin said yes through happy tears while he smiled like he'd won something infinitely more valuable than any company. 6 months later, they stood in a traditional Korean wedding hall wearing beautiful custom hanbok, surrounded by family and friends who had no idea about the Vegas chapel or fake marriage or the complicated journey that brought them here. Soo-jin's mother cried happy tears in the front row, still overwhelmed with gratitude for the specialist treatment that gave her new life. This ceremony was entirely real. The vows were real, promises they meant with every fiber of their beings. The love shining in their eyes was undeniably powerful. When Min-jae gently took Soo-jin's hands adorned with traditional silk flowers and looked at her with her jokduri gleaming under the lights, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. In their new shared life afterward, Min-jae still created detailed spreadsheets for everything, because some habits were too ingrained to disappear. But now, those spreadsheets included romantic date nights and surprise weekend getaways, and a running list of future baby names that made Soo-jin laugh every time he added suggestions. She still stayed in her studio apartment sometimes because she wanted to remind him how normal people without wealth lived. He still couldn't cook to save his life, and probably never would, but he tried anyway because he loved watching her laugh at his disasters. They argued about throw pillows and whether scheduling quality time on calendars was reasonable, but now their arguments ended with kisses and laughter instead of cold silence. Grandmother Kang sat in the front row, beaming with satisfaction at a match she'd orchestrated perfectly from the beginning, and afterward took full credit for their happiness to anyone who would listen. She reminded them regularly about the great-grandchildren she was expecting, but now it was said with warmth and genuine excitement rather than stern demands. The Vegas marriage certificate was framed in their home as a permanent reminder of how unexpectedly and chaotically love could begin from the most unlikely circumstances. They never told most people the full truth about how their marriage began as a drunken mistake, followed by desperate business arrangements and complicated feelings neither had been brave enough to acknowledge. Some secrets were worth keeping forever, sacred just between the two of them and the wise grandmother who had seen their future before they could. What mattered was that the accidental wife had become his real wife, his partner in every sense, and he was never letting her go. The fake marriage had lasted exactly 6 months as planned. The real one would last forever.
If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.